Very good. Thank you, Wendy. And hello to everyone again. You may recognize the image that's before you on the screen right now. And I'm starting here just to kind of warm our thinking up around what is value and how do people think about value. Well, Warren Buffett thinks about business value all the time. He seems to have developed a successful track record on developing value and recognizing value. And he says very simply, price is what you pay, value is what you get. Well, if you're listening in, you might be wondering, well, how is that of much help? Let's take this to, let's see, just, there we go. So in slide number 11, I'm going to ask you to just pause for a moment and reflect on your own work experience, your business experience, about how you think about business value. And one way to focus in on that in a meaningful way today, I'm hopeful you'll consider the kind of questions about business value that from time to time, perhaps you have a feeling that you struggle to answer. You might find yourself in a position where you're accountable for delivering business value through the successful execution of projects. So I'm wondering, which questions do you struggle to answer? If you take a look at slide number 12, in working with a broad spectrum of leaders responsible for executing strategy, delivering successful projects, delivering value, we find these 5 questions to be very common among project managers and others in organizations. And the first is around the fact that different people within the organization have different perspectives about the definition of value and deciding what has value and how much. And it's even worse than that. Sometimes those perspectives change over time. So I'm wondering if you've had that experience as well, where you've discovered, perhaps later than you would have liked, that your perspective on the value on the delivery, the successful delivery of a project, is maybe different than others' expectations. There's a lot of talk also in question number 2 here about maximization of value. Well, just what does that mean in terms of, so how do we act? What do we do differently in order to maximize business value? And especially day-to-day decision making. If we think about what the future of a decision that you're going to make perhaps later today or later this week, how's that decision going to affect the various aspects of value expected as a result of your project? And the third question, how do you know and verify or validate after a project has been executed, have they delivered the value in full? Have they delivered any value in all? And how should we think about that? When we start to get down to a more granular level in question number 4, often people will wonder when they have choices that are compelled by a limited time, limited funding, perhaps funding is being removed from a project, or there's reconsideration of scope, which functionality is going to stay and which functionality is going to go. And that's not only considered at the beginning of projects, but don't you also find that that's considered sometimes very late in a project as we're dashing to the finish line and meeting a hard stop date for delivering the results of a project. And finally, in question number 5, are all types of value created equal? Are there, in fact, different kinds of value? So, for example, some measures of value are clearly financially related, and your chief financial officer and other key business stakeholders have meaningful ways to their stakeholders and shareholders, perhaps, about what value means. In addition to that, there are non-financial measures of value, and they often are well to be considered in order to deliver projects successfully. So the question becomes, how do we measure them to form a basis for how to compare them? How do we compare apples and oranges? So as we consider these kind of questions, and maybe you have other questions, perhaps one of these questions is of particular interest to you, let's proceed and think about what other project managers have said and have been captured in a study that was published in 2016 by the Project Management Institute in their Pulse of Profession document was called Identify Benefits to Drive Business Results. And here you see captured in the cartoon bubbles just a small selection of some of the comments about how project managers and senior leaders in organizations think about business value. And as you kind of scan the slide here, you may find, as I did, there are at least 4 themes that emerged. One is the need for focus on value. Why are we doing this project in the first place? What value is it expected to be delivered? How do we measure it? Okay, and what triggers the successful execution of a project? And the one comment that very much resonated with my experience in leading project teams in small and large organizations is the one that's on the far right-hand side. And I'll just kind of briefly read it for you. If a team does not understand why they are working on a project, it's hard to maintain the momentum to get the project completed on time and within budget. I'm wondering if you've experienced that as well. In your leadership of projects, it's very important for people to be able to ask, why are we doing this? So that they can offer their commitment. Today's world, we're moving, of course, more and more, perhaps you've seen this as well, we've certainly seen it at Group Atlantic, more and more from a control end of the spectrum to a commitment end of the spectrum. The emergence of agile approaches to work are very much dependent on commitment of individuals to the why of a project. So we turn to slide number 14. So other research I'm hopeful you find interesting. So what we're seeing here is that for $1 billion business, and across a range on the left-hand side from a low benefits realization maturity to the right-hand side of a high benefits realization maturity. Actually, I've got those reversed. Left-hand side, high benefits realization, right-hand side, low benefits realization. There's a delta of $112 million in how much is wasted. So think about that. First question I would ask is, does your organization measure waste? And does your organization have a sense, if not a kind of a assessed measurement of your benefits realization maturity? Because what we see here is that where you have low benefits realization maturity, there's a much, much more waste. In fact, it's a 3-to-1 ratio. So you may not be $1 billion business, but the ratios seem to apply. And by the way, I commend this report to you. There's a lot of other useful data in this report. We'll take a little bit more look at it in a slide or two. So what does this mean? So how would we know, if, as a project manager, if my project orientation is a high benefits realization or a low benefits realization maturity, or the organization in which my project works, is it on the high end of the scale or the low end of the scale? So if we took a look at a model from Gartner here on slide number 15, it's got a matrix that shows up in the upper row, row number 1, low benefits maturity, and the final row at the bottom, high benefits maturity. And there are 3 columns here, and it talks about planning value, executing on value, and harvesting value. I think that metaphor, and an agricultural metaphor of harvesting value is a powerful one. So if we just take a quick look at the top row of labeled chaos, row number 1, you could quickly do a qualitative, quick self-assessment and determine are decisions about value in your organization, maybe it's about pet projects, black market projects, a charismatic leader in the organization gets their way, perhaps is able to persuade funding towards their cause, not necessarily optimizing the enterprise results, but optimizing their own personal agenda in the planning column. And what happens often is without high benefits realization maturity, we often see inconsistent project results, inconsistent project management execution. And I don't know if you've experienced this, I certainly have, kind of a throw it over the wall culture. We got our piece done,